Baby, it's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week there are so many things to talk about right now. First off, we have the whole systematic racism issue. I've talked about this. My thoughts have been, don't be a racist. Teach your children to not see skin color, and if you see something, say something. There is nothing wrong with outing the racists. But even folks who I know and believe not to be racist at all, friends of mine have said to me, Mike, but don't all lives matter? And it's like, yeah, you fucking idiot. All lives do matter, but this isn't about saying that you don't matter. It's realizing that you have no idea what a person of color goes through on a daily basis, and there are so many things that they experience differently than you and I. I'm not saying your grandmother or cousin doesn't matter, it just doesn't matter right now. So there's that shit, and then we have the virus. Well, it looks like science was right. Everything seems to be spreading again, but the funny thing about it this time is that no one seems to be caring at all about it. In the beginning of this shit, there's one case in Seattle and the whole country, me included, goes into full panic mode. Lately, we've been averaging 30,000 new cases a day, and it's no big deal. It's time to open up Applebee's. So that's kind of scary, but what's getting scarier for me is this podcast. I started this thing with the goal of documenting the history of the lives of those in action sports. And to do so, I had to quit my job to follow this dream because I knew I could be one of the best at this. And things have been on the rise steadily for the past 180 episodes. My numbers have never been higher. My guest list is both diverse and all-time. But the one thing with starting a new business is that you have to make money doing it. And I've had some great sponsors to make this show happen over the years. But the virus has changed things. While I was so close to achieving my goal of getting my sixth and final sponsor, COVID hits. And while everyone was losing their jobs or being furloughed, my sponsor stuck by me. But as time moved on, like a lot of people, COVID started to impact me. As you'll notice, I've gone from 5 sponsors to 4 sponsors to 3. And as of this week, I have 2 sponsors left. And there are no hard feelings, it's a sign of the times. The good news is that I have Stanley and 10 Barrel. So while I'm kind of bummed on this reality for the show, I do have a ton of profuse juice to drink and they stay really cold in my Stanley pint glasses. So while I have that going for me, a stacked list of guests to take me through the fall, I almost feel like I'm at a crossroads. Like, what happens if I can't get new sponsors in the near future? Do I have to go back to actually working a real job? I'm good at that, but I don't think I really want to do that again. So if you know somebody at a brand or you happen to work at a brand and like the podcast, please hit me up at mike@thepowellmovement.com and we can talk about supporting the show. Why am I sharing this? I have no idea. It's a scary time for me. But it's also a situation that almost every athlete that I interview experiences. And while I'm no athlete, I can now relate to being dropped. But for some people, getting dropped creates new and better experiences. And my guest this week, Kathryn Smith, is a perfect example of that. Kathryn is the global brand director over at Skullcandy. And on the podcast, we talk about her life as an identical twin, skiing, atomic, Skullcandy, and a whole lot more. Before we get into it, I need to let you know that I've partnered up with the High Fives Foundation for my drinking challenges that happen on Instagram every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 5 p.m. Now, losers will be donating an amount of their choice to the High Fives Foundation, and the goal is to raise $1 million through drinking beer. I should be 30-1 by the time this podcast comes out, and that is pretty impressive. So, if you want to be a good person and drink against me, all you'll need to do is email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I'll get you on the schedule. Now I want to ask you to subscribe to the show, tell a friend to listen, and get ready for a fun hour with Kathryn Smith. We've been talking about doing a podcast for almost 4 years, I feel like, and you've always been so nice to me. You send me a bunch of product, I use them on all my podcasts, and you always tell me that you'll do a podcast with me, and then it doesn't happen. What changed your mind this time around?
Well, you know what? I don't know. It seems hard, and I don't know if your other guests feel like this, to think about talking probably about yourself to some degree for an hour. And I don't know. I guess I finally just got okay with it and like kind of ready to talk through it. And It just took me a little while. I don't know. I'm sure we'll talk through some of it, but I just have like a little scar tissue on some stuff and I'm just ready now, I guess.
Well, I'm glad that you're ready. And this time in the world is a crazy time. And I've heard a few things about you that you're notorious for in your life. One of them is not washing your hands because they make your hands too dry. And then the other thing is absolutely loving going into your office for work. And with this whole virus thing, you have to wash your hands and you can't go in the office. How are you living?
Oh my gosh, called out. Yeah, I have the driest hands, and when I would wash my hands, it would make them dry. So I use hand sanitizer a lot, so naturally I'm already in that kind of vibe. But I'm like so embarrassed now to say that out loud to anyone because it's obsessive hand washing and my hands have never looked worse, but I've never been more healthy probably. But yeah, the transition of not going in the office and being involved in that office culture it's hard for me actually. I've learned to really like working at home and gotten in the vibe, but I thrive off of like social connection and collaboration and being around my team and stuff. And so I'm definitely missing that to some degree, but I also get to wake up and take a shower and immediately start working and not have to commute for 40 minutes every day each way. So that's nice too.
Yeah, that is nice. And your title these days is a heavy one. You are Global Brand Director over at Skullcandy. And while we'll talk about what you do later, I think your job would involve a shit ton of travel. And the virus has to change all of that as well. How often are you on the road for work and what's that going to be like in the future?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the future holds. We were pretty lucky. We spent almost the whole month of February in and out of LA, which is where we do a lot of our production, like content production. We actually work with Nick Martini, who I think you've talked to, and those Stepped guys. And we were there up until this started to hit. Like it was even starting to hit, and we were still there. And then we got grounded, of course, just like everyone else. And it was really lucky because we got almost everything done, like all the content at least filmed that we needed to do before this. So we were kind of going to be chill for a little while. We were going to South by and a few other big events, but we're grounded. And I used to travel. We'll talk about Skullcandy. I used to travel so much with my international marketing position that when I took the global brand director position, I mostly just do New York and LA now. And it's kind of nice to be domestic and be home a little bit more. So I'm okay with it for now, but I'll probably crave it here pretty soon.
And a ton of travel isn't something that I think a ton of kids aspire to do when they grow up in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. What's life like in that part of the country?
Blowing Rock is like the tiny little town, like population of 800. That's like in the summer when that's its major tourist time. And it's in the northwest part of North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains. So like the tiniest little mountains where we learned to ski and be a part of like mountain town culture. And it was idyllic. Is that the way we say it? At the time, I think it was great, and growing up in a small town's awesome. And now when I go back, we went back last summer for a wedding. It's like shocking how small and little it was. And I don't understand how we didn't get into more trouble, honestly. So it's awesome. I think there's a really nice thing about a small town growing up. Yeah, it's nice to go back, but it's pretty little. And it's also pretty country. Like, I don't have a major accent, but we grew up like in the country. So it's fun to go back down south and kind of be a part of that world. So
I was part of that world a little bit too. I went to college at Radford University in southwestern Virginia.
yeah.
There is some backwoods aspects of where I went to school, and my freshman year, we saw the Klan march through our town, which is the most powerful and scary thing I've ever seen in my life. Did you see some upsetting shit growing up in the South and just a weird climate?
Yeah, honestly, like I can remember when we were little, the Klan had pulled a permit or something to do something similar in the bigger town near us called Boone, North Carolina. And I can remember my parents like talking about that, but of course I didn't really know what that meant. We were pretty little. But now I can't even imagine how jarring and shocking that must be to witness in real life. That's stunning, I think. But my grandparents and my parents are all from South Alabama. And so we did grow up around and like were involved in some sort of inherent, I don't know if racism is the right word because I don't think of any of them as racist by any means, but just, they grew up in a time of segregation, and both of my parents went to the University of Alabama when they were starting to desegregate and do all that stuff. So There is some character building stuff about the South that people don't realize because they just think it's kind of redneck and dumb. And it's not. It has a lot of really cool culture that's shaped things. But I don't know if I have an experience that was like game changing for me like that. Like seeing the Klan would be game changing, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it was weird. The group of Klansmen from Radford, Virginia went to a North Carolina town, and the North Carolina town Klansmen came to Radford, and that's how they did it. So if they're ever unmasked, I guess they wouldn't know people. Very scary, very heavy.
Whoa.
Yeah. Growing up for you, though, you have another interesting thing about you. You have an identical twin sister. It's fascinating to me. Were you guys best friends throughout life?
Yeah, I have an identical twin. We look lots alike, of course, but like sometimes twins don't look that much alike, even identical, but we're pretty similar. And we have an older brother who's 12 years older than us. He's our full brother, but like he was in high school when we were in elementary school, and he was in college when we were kind of growing up in high school. So we didn't have as tight a relationship with him as we did with one another. And growing up, we were close. And through high school, we had a lot of that like girl stuff that was like pulling hair. And I can remember physically fighting with her. And she was such a snitch. Like she dated the preacher's son, actually. And she would tell on me if I did anything or snuck out and stuff like that. So we were a little not so close in high school. And then once college, and ever since college started, we went to college together, and then we moved out to Colorado together and sort of started our adulthood together. And we truly are best friends, like in every single way. We talk every day, and it's probably weird, but we're super tight. But growing up with a twin is wild. I sometimes tell my husband now that the reason I don't like to share is because I had to grow up sharing all the time with someone else, and I don't like to share anymore.
Did they dress you alike?
Yeah, my mom dresses pretty similar. I think it was mostly out of laziness. She was a full-time working mom, as was my dad, and she would buy lots of the same color, like leggings and dresses. But I don't think it was because she like really wanted us to look like twins. I think it was just because it was easier to buy things in bulk, and we didn't really have a lot of that like twin gaming on people and playing pranks and stuff. That wasn't really our deal.
And then getting into skiing, you said you had some mountains near you. I think you got beach and sugar, and then you probably make the pilgrimage to Snowshoe when you want to get good skiing in. Is that kind of how it goes weekends here and there with the family?
Yeah, we grew up skiing a little mountain called Appalachian Ski Mountain, which is between Blowing Rock and Boone. And on snow days, like we had snow days there where they would let us out of school, you could ski for $5. And so my parents would take us there and just drop us off. It wasn't like family ski day. It was like babysitting, essentially.
Both your parents worked, you said, right?
Yeah, they both worked. Like my mom was a professor and my dad owned a construction company, and they couldn't really watch us when we were home. So they would just take us to the ski resort. All of our friends skied on snow days too. And that's how we kind of learned to ski. My godparents own some ski retailers called Alpine Ski Center, and they used to bring us out west every winter just as sort of part of their family, and we would come out west and ski. But it wasn't really a family thing. It was much more of like, we need something for these kids to do. And that's what we did on weekends and snow days and stuff. So that started it.
And Alpine Ski Center, they have, 5-6 shops in the Carolinas, I feel like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think they may have one in like Tennessee and maybe one in Virginia, but yeah, mostly in the Carolinas. And our godfather, his name's Bob Quinlan, started them years and years ago. And yeah, they're just tiny little mom and pop ski shops, but it's what introduced us to skiing. I mean, they are really the reason why we skied. I don't think we would ever have kept up with it and even moved out west if it weren't for them taking us out west when we were younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then soccer was your thing that you were serious about when you were a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I played soccer all growing up, and it was a really nice team sport to have. And I think it taught my sister and I, and my brother played soccer too. And I think it taught us a ton, and we were really happy to be involved in team sports. And we stopped skiing at the time. You couldn't really play a high school sport and ski, and we didn't get enough snow where it mattered that much, So playing soccer, yeah, it was just more of an outlet. And I think high school sports in general are just ways to be involved and learn how to communicate with the team. So yeah, that was definitely our vibe then, for sure, just being on a team sport.
And then I feel like a weird part of your childhood, it might be your freshman year in high school, it might be 8th grade, I'm not even sure, but North Carolina moves to France. And that just has to be culture shock, I would think. What's that all about?
Yeah, my mom, like I said, she was an English professor at the local university where we were raised. And she came in one day when we were in seventh grade and she said, "You're spending your eighth grade year in France in a little town called Angers, which is 2 hours southwest of Paris." And we were so upset with her. Like, when you're in eighth grade, you think you're like, or going into eighth grade, you think you're so cool and your friends matter so much. And we didn't speak a single bit of French. And yeah, she up and moved herself and my sister and I. And then my dad would come visit whenever he could. He was still at home working. So he would go back and forth every few weeks. And then she put us in like a country school, like out in the middle of nowhere in France. And we had each other, I guess. We actually ended up making some like friends and it was a really nice experience now. But at the time we were so pissed off with her and just like not impressed that she was going to do that to us.
So you moved back to North Carolina, and was there anything special about your high school? Were you homecoming queen? Did you get any superlatives, get any scholarships?
No, not for me. I dated the prom king. I had a boyfriend all through high school. He was sort of the like that kind of guy, like a all-American wrestler, an incredible soccer player, and like just this sort of like perfect little high schooler. And I can remember the time being like, "Oh, I'm so lucky to date him," and stuff like that, was just so superficial. But we had a really great little high school upbringing. I mean, I don't honestly have like, besides that, I feel like people should really take advantage of how nice and fun high school can be. I don't have anything really life-changing about high school. We had a really good experience, luckily, with high school. And I know it can be hard. But yeah, for myself and even my sister, I think we had a pretty good high school upbringing.
Were you guys offered scholarships? Because I looked and it looked like you were offered a scholarship to NC State and one to the College of Charleston.
We were offered scholarship. I always talk in we, so I should just talk about myself, but being a twin makes me talk like that. But yeah, like light scholarships to both of them. We got into a few other schools, but decided to go to College of Charleston. And specifically for myself, like I remember thinking all of my high school friends are going to these local state schools, and College of Charleston felt very different than like UNC and NC State and all of those schools. And it felt good to kind of buck the trend of just going to a state school. And if you've ever been to Charleston, it's like one of the most stunning cities in the entire US. And so we went down there and visited, and it was like a no-brainer. With or without friends and the environment and our family being close, like it was absolutely the best choice to make. So it was awesome.
And you major in art history and art management, not really the ideal path to get you into the ski industry by any means. But what was your goal with those majors? Like in a dream scenario, what kind of work would you be doing with those degrees?
It's kind of weird. Like I started taking art history as a freshman and I just liked it. And I got enough down the path where I was like, oh, I have enough credits for this. I might as well just keep going with it. And arts management is essentially business in the arts. So if you want to run a gallery or work in business and museums and things like that, like that's sort of the support you need. So I was a double major with those two things. And honestly, I wasn't thinking about what my future was going to be. I just liked what I was doing. And I think that like a liberal arts education does provide enough sort of depth in terms of different classes you take and studies that you can take a college education, especially liberal arts education, and do a lot with it. And getting into the ski industry, which I'm sure we'll start to hit on, like my first boss hired me because I had an arts history background and he was a history major when he was in college, and he appreciated sort of the work ethic of those majors. And that's how I got my first job with him. So it did take me somewhere.
So you get your degrees and you don't go get a job right away. You do what I think every kid should do. I did the same thing. You take a couple years in Colorado and you head out to Steamboat.
Yeah. Me and my sister and two of our friends that actually went to the University of North Carolina, we got in a car and packed everything up and left Charleston and moved to Steamboat pretty blind. We had been there as children. We were going to move to Breckenridge, and then something fell through with like our house, or I can't remember. So we were like, screw it, let's just go up to Steamboat. We've been there before, like, let's go. And so we moved there and we stayed in a hotel for like a week, the four of us and two dogs. And then we got a house and we got jobs. And I'm so happy that we ended up moving to Steamboat. No shade on Breck, but Steamboat is just such a lovely town, and it's good skiing and good culture and community. And like, it's just kind of a different place than Breck. But we moved out there blind, and then I stayed for about 3 years, 2.5 years, and my sister is actually still there. Same with one of the other girls that went with us. So that's hometown for them now.
Yeah, it's amazing how those 2-year things, if you don't have another plan or something else going on, can definitely suck you in. What kind of work were you doing when you were in Steamboat?
I was just working at like a boutique, like a women's store, and I was making like very little money, but I kind of liked it and it felt kind of different. But I do agree it's like a nice life-changing time to like get out of college and work for a minute and take some time to do something you care about. And honestly, I worked at this boutique where I don't know if you know him, Marty Kerrigan. He's kind of a part of the ski industry and random rep worlds. His wife worked at that boutique. And so when I was like, hey, I'm thinking about moving, blah, 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 they're the ones that hooked me up with SIA, which is the Snow Sports Industries America, that big trade show.
Yeah.
They're the one that hooked me up with an interview with them. So they kind of helped set the path because he had been a part of SIA for some reason. I can't really remember the relationship, but yeah, they kind of kicked it off for me.
Cool. And what does your skiing look like there? Because I'm sure you get there from North Carolina, and it's not like you are focused on being like a hardcore skier in North Carolina. You're just doing it for fun. When you move out to Colorado, I'm sure you're probably skiing 5 days a week, as much as you can, I would think. And are you skiing powder at that point, or are you just figuring it out?
I feel like we were just figuring it out. Like, I can remember thinking like, oh yeah, I know how to ski, right? Like, we got there in late summer and then the fall was building, and in my head, I'm like, yeah, I know how to ski, of course. And then the first like opening day, which is usually like right before Thanksgiving or something, we skied. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to ski. Like, I can't ski like these people. Like, I grew up on East Coast shit snow, not even like icy, teaches you technique type snow, just like 200 vertical feet and a slow speed quad that you never got to take laps on. So we really didn't know how to ski. So I think those like 2 or 3 years I was there, like I can remember turning 100 and 101 days or something like that on my past and being like, wow, like I'm actually becoming a, quote unquote skier. I don't think at that point I was even like a great skier, but I felt really comfortable on my skis, and Steamboat was getting like 500 and 600 inches a winter. So it was like you couldn't even avoid the powder, learning that stuff. But the skiing's good in Steamboat. I wouldn't say it's as good as like, where I am now in Salt Lake City. But it is, I even consider it kind of my home mountain now because it's one of those mountains I can ski this thing top to bottom, front to end. I know everything about it. Yeah, and it feels like when I go there, it's kind of my home mountain, and I love it for that.
Now it is time to take my first sponsor break, and the 10 Barrel Brewery based out of Bend, Oregon has been brewing the Northwest's best beer since 2006. But they don't only brew tasty beer. They have supported the ski, snowboard, and bike lifestyle with athletes and events because that's what they are all about. And with events on hold at the moment, it's all about the athletes, and the current lineup is mountain biker Brittany White, snowboarder Eric Jackson, Curtis Cizik, biker Carson Sorch, and skier Lucas Walks. And that world-class team is just one way that 10 Barrel puts its money where its mouth is. While times are different right about now, some things are still the same. The next time you head to the store, please pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and do what the folks who brew the beer like to do: drink beer outside. My next sponsor is Stanley, a brand that's been around for over 100 years and is known as the brand that forever changed the way that hot drinks are consumed with the invention of the steel vacuum bottle. Back then, the technology was game-changing, and today, Stanley will keep your coffee hotter for longer than any other bottle on the market, and it'll also keep your beverages colder. Nothing else comes close to the brand that invented this category. I swear by Stanley products, and now you can too, because I'm going to save you 30% off the entire website. All you need to do is head on over to stanley-pmi.com, do some shopping, and at checkout, you want to enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, and I highly recommend the pint glasses. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. So Steamboat's where you fall in love with the sport, and you're like 2.5 years in there, and it sounds like you're able to get an interview through somebody you know with the SIA.
Yep.
But no one just packs up for Steamboat and leaves to go to a job in D.C. with the SIA. I mean, that can't be your dream job. How do you end up moving to D.C.?
I hate to admit this, but I had a boy there that we had dated in college for a while, and I was getting sort of burnt out and just some of the culture stuff in Steamboat, and we had started dating again, and he was like, just move here. And I think it was like just the little push I needed to go, okay, might as well try it. And I remember when I left, I like got in my Jeep and I was picking my dad up in Denver to drive across the country with me. And I cried for like 3 hours the whole way to Denver. I cried and cried and was like, what am I doing? And I can't believe this. And it was a legitimate culture shock to like get to DC. And I didn't even have the job at that point. I was like moving there blind. I just had an interview. And I'm really happy I did it because it put me in the path where I am now. But at the time, like thinking about leaving a ski town, it's really hard because leaving a little town it's such a nice community there. And it was just like, well, I'm leaving. And I left my sister too.
Leave your sister, leave a whole bunch of hemp necklaces with glass blown pieces in it, and you go to a place that's full of suits, people, traffic, and it is terrible. It's not that terrible, but I grew up in Great Falls and then moved to McLean. The SIA happens to be located in McLean. It's about 10 minutes from DC. Do you live in Virginia or do you commute from downtown?
God, I didn't realize you grew up there, so you completely know it. But yeah, I lived actually in Georgetown. I knew that I wanted to be like in the city and just commute out. And the traffic in DC is unheard of, ridiculous.
Yep.
But I was reverse commuting, because people come in the city and I was actually leaving the city to go out, like 10 miles, but probably 30 minutes of driving outside of DC. And I have no idea why their offices were out there, but they were. And I lived in the city. And it was the time where Barack Obama was getting elected and coming to office. So it was this really like on fire time to be in DC. And I don't think I'd ever really move back to DC, but I'm so happy I did it because like DC was just this like cultural hotspot and you could just feel the emotions that were coming out of like what was happening with Obama and the change. And we stood on the mall when he did his inauguration speech and just really kind of transformative to be a part of a political culture that I think a lot of people don't realize that DC can really be that way. Like it is so involved in politics and what you do and what's going on in the world. I mean, I can remember saying, I work for a trade show in the ski industry and people would just like brush me off, because I didn't do anything that mattered to them or political at all.
I mean, my high school was Tucker Quayle went to my high school after Dan Quayle was elected. Scalia, Tom DeLay's wife was a teacher. My friend's dad was an arms dealer in Budapest. There was all kinds of government stuff going on and weird stuff. But at the SIA, I used to go into the offices there when I would go home because I lived right near it and I just work out of the SIA office at times. And I always found that at the SIA and at Outdoor Retailer, there's a lot more women in those offices than any other outdoors company that I've ever been in. Do you notice that at all? Is that just part of the trade show game or is that me?
I feel like it's because women run shit, right?
I'm not saying they don't, but it was just weird in that world.
I don't know. That's the only trade show like organization I've worked for. But at that office particularly, there were mostly women. Like David and Jimmy, who was the one that hired me, like it was him and the CFO and sales director and maybe one or two other dudes. But like really it was mostly women. Like all of marketing, all of trade show, production, even like the research, all that stuff was run by women. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why it is that way besides that maybe they were just the best employees.
Okay. And while I'm sure this has changed over time, what does SIA do other than a trade show? I mean, because I think of them as just the trade show, and I'm sure there's other lobbying and things that they do, or at least I hear there are. But what do they actually do that benefits the brands and consumers and retailers and everyone?
I can't speak for where it is now because that whole world, as you know, has like changed so much between like the merger and the shows and all that stuff. But at the time, the reason it was in DC is because it used to really do a lot of lobbying. It had lawyers that were doing lobbying for environmental impact and outdoors and a lot of things like tariffs and stuff that companies that were a part of its organization needed them for in the 50s, 60s, 70s and stuff like that. And then it really became a very major trade show and it kind of swooped up all the little East Coast, West Coast type shows. And on top of that, I think was the leader in research. Whenever marketing teams at like Atomic and Solomon and K2 and like all that stuff, like whenever they needed research on like their consumers and their sell-through and like all that stuff, like SIA was the company that was pulling that research and working. I think it was Leisure Trends at the time. Yep. Now it's probably in PD, but yeah, they were the one doing the big readout on all the research. So that was like one of the most major pieces of it. And this woman, Kelly Davis, ran it and she was such a brilliant mind. And I think that's part of the reason people had memberships with SA besides saving money on the trade show because they really needed that research and to be a part of it.
Yeah, I can see that. But when you think of the trade show, it's got to be the biggest revenue generator, I would think, for the SIA, or at least when you were there, and I'm guessing pretty much now, although I think they run more in regional shows. But trade shows, are they going to be a thing of the past? What do you think is going to happen with gatherings of 50,000 people looking at products?
I don't know. I mean, at Skullcandy now, we don't go to OR anymore, like those shows, but we go to CES and we go to Complex Con and stuff like that. And one of my sort of bosses and mentor at Atomic, we'd always sort of like talk through, like, what are trade shows? And like, do you really need them? And how can we make this like a more sort of person-to-person contact, not happening once a year? And I'm wondering if that's what's going to happen. Like, I think brands like Burton and other ones like became regional showrooms and really could present themselves time and time again in their best light at their own HQ or in regional showrooms. And that's probably the way things are going to go. Like, I can't imagine going into a 50,000 person event at this point. And I have a team that manages events at Skullcandy, and like once a week we get emails like, this event's canceled and this event's canceled and this event. And it's like things that are happening in November and December. So it scares me for that trade show specifically, because you're right. It is the revenue generator. It's the place where everyone comes together. And yeah, I have a soft spot for that show, and I hope it doesn't totally bite the dust, but I don't know what will happen.
Yeah, who knows?
I know.
At this point in the story, though, you're like 23, 24 years old. You have a dream job, which you get hired for during the financial crisis, which is amazing. But after like 2 years of SIA, you pack it up and I think you go to Utah. What is the reasoning behind that? Sick of DC?
Yeah, I kind of was. Like, I had been at SIA, I think, for like 2.5 years, and I started as like an executive assistant, and then I worked into marketing, and I was just a little bit over it. I've made 2 very close friends there, but overall it was a really hard scene to like be involved in, and it was exhausting. And I always loved being out west. And my sister, she was out here in Colorado, and so there was a job opening at Atomic, at the ski company Atomic. And I applied for it and got an interview, and I had already been planning on moving. And I knew in the end, like, I want to be out west. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Atomic or any company. Like, I want to be out west, and I didn't want to be in Denver. I thought to be in Salt Lake. And so I moved here, and I knew a few people here, not many, and ended up getting the job at Atomic, which was incredible. And that kind of set me off here. But yeah, the mountains have kind of pulled me back to some degree.
So what's the hiring process for Atomic? You go in for an interview, do they put you in a room with like 15 different people, then make you go home and wait 3 months, and then they're like, you're hired?
That's sort of like how Skullcandy was. But no, Atomic was actually interesting. I considered myself to be like a skier, but you've interviewed the best skiers in the world, you know? And I'm not a skier like that. Like, at this time, I'm like a weekend warrior skier, you know? And so I went there. Mike Adams, who was on the board at SIA, he helped put in a good word for me. And I interviewed with, at the time, the marketing director, Judd.
So wait, when you say him, he's done so much behind the scenes for brands, more than almost anyone, I feel like.
Yeah.
What makes that dude special? Sorry to cut you off and make you tell a story before the time that you should, but...
No, it's fine, because I was hoping you'd hit on Jordan, because like he is integral in the, not just ski industry, but outdoor, and just like a very hyper-focused business mind. But I didn't know anything about him. I interviewed with him and then Jake Strasburger, the two of them with Atomic. And Jordan, after working with him and being a part of his team, I consider him like one of my mentors and has pushed me to where I am now. Like, brilliant marketing mind, but also brilliant business mind, which I think to be successful in marketing, you have to understand why you're doing marketing, how it drives revenue, like what's going on in the world. You can't just sort of like spitball things. And Jordan never did that. Like, I think Jordan single-handedly turned Atomic at the time from a race brand to a free ski sort of culturally cool brand.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah, he brought on some of the best athletes, Crispin Chetler, Sage, Tim Durkee, like all those guys to help turn that brand around, while also paying homage to the race side of things, because that is part of Atomic's culture and DNA. But like in the US, I mean, you've been a part of it longer than me. Like, I would attribute him and Mike Adams and probably Jake to turning that brand into what it probably currently is.
I put it all on Jordan Judd's shoulders, really.
Yeah, he's brilliant. And he's such a good marketer. Like, even to this day, like, we still talk. every few months, like we'll kind of text or say something. And he has done a great job at the Amer brands. He did an incredible job at Armada and then going back to the Amer brand. So yeah, I think he deserves all the credit for everything he's done, for sure.
And he hires you and brings you in, him and a bunch of others. And the strange thing about Atomic, to me, is that you are in the role of distributor. And when I was at K2, we were the brand and we put together the playbook for distributors to translate and get out to their marketplaces. But you are the distributor who's getting the playbook from the Euros, and you have to put that into your marketplaces. So you really don't have as much control. What are the challenges that it brings to the table for a marketer having to deal with someone else's playbook that doesn't live in the US?
Oh, that's such a good question, because now that I'm at an HQ like you were, I realize how painful that can be. And I have a lot of like empathy for our international regions, because like what Jordan did was take a playbook that they tried to force down his throat and say like, yeah, no, like we need to do something different and we need the support to do that. So I think it does take really incredible relationships with your HQ and not really putting your hands up, but also saying like, yeah, we understand race culture and the heritage and what's going on, but like for our region specifically, this matters, and we'll keep our brand culture alive and it will still be the same brand, but like this is what we need to be successful. And it wasn't like a big fight. You know, I ended up working for Solomon as well, but like Atomic and the office in Austria, they trusted Jordan and they trusted Mike and they trusted myself and Jake. And I think because there was trust, at least, like they let him and us have a little more rope, honestly, because they could have just been like, no, you're sponsoring racers. You're a red and white brand. You're skiers, like racers only. And that's it. And I don't think any of those people would have stayed there. But I know what you mean, for sure. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I have a lot of empathy for working with distributors, for sure.
And as far as the job goes, I'm sure there's a ton of shit going on between catalogs, media buys, website, merchandising, trade shows, all of that kind of office stuff. Then there's a lot of travel as well. And one thing with the travel is there are some interesting trips that marketing managers go to. And one of them is Powder Week. And you, coming from Washington, D.C. at this point with 2 years at Steamboat, when you go to Powder Week, that's some serious shit where you're put in some gnarly terrain. How scary is that for you your first time there?
Oh my God. I can't believe you're asking this, because I was wondering if this would come up. So like we had been at SAA and I was riding home with like Jake and Jordan from Denver. And one of them said like, you better get your ass on the stair stepper or something like that, because you're going to be hiking. And I'm like, what are they talking about? You know, I'm like, that's fine. Like I know how to ski. I can hike with my skis, like whatever. But I always had their support. So like at the time I was sort of, I hate to say like the girl on their team, but like I was that position. And Jake is an incredible skier. Jordan's an incredible skier. And they're like, we're going to Powder Week with you and you'll kind of play support crew. Right. And then Jordan had something come up, or he had to go to Europe to meet the team over there. And Jake broke his leg and they were like, yeah, now you're going on your own. And I was so scared, like so much anxiety, so scared. Like the best skiers, you know, the best skiers in the world are skiers at Powder Week and for the brands and stuff like that. And like, I wasn't that person at all.
And everybody's there to get after it.
Oh my God. In Jackson, I'd never skied Jackson. I'd never like really hiked like that. And I swear Jordan, and I don't know if he'll admit to this or not, I swear he called Ashley and some of those guys at Powder. And we had a little team up there, like Bryce Newcomb, Jason Tattersall, some of these like great guys from Jackson. And they rallied around me and they kind of took me under their wings and really helped me. And I couldn't ski like those people. I mean, I still can't ski like those people. They're incredible skiers. But like, I remember the first time I took skis out with people, it was like, I can't remember her name, Heidi she was from Telluride, and Caroline Gleich and a few people, and Bryce Newcomb. And they skied with me and we skied and you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. Like, I don't even know what Jackson looks like that day. And it was awesome. And it was like one of those moments where I was like, okay, let your guard down. Don't be so scared. This is a community. This is like such a like family to some degree. So it was awesome, but scary. I was scared, like shaking, scared. So
that happens to people, especially when you're not a pro skier, but you get put with all those pro skiers.
Yeah.
But it seems like every 2 years with the Amer Corporation, there's a shuffling of the deck. And you start, and it's all about Atomic, and the brands, I think, are pretty separate. Mm-hmm. But then that all changes because they shuffle the deck, and you're the consumer marketing manager for the Americas. What does this change mean to your day-to-day life? Are you more focused on Solomon than Atomic now?
Not necessarily. Like, it drastically meant that I worked for Solomon, which Jordan had kind of bred me. And I think Jenny, now Taylor, would say the same thing. Like,
Did you say Jordan bred you?
like, no, I shouldn't say it that way. He bred me to believe Atomic is its brand and Solomon is its brand, and this is what you believe, and we are competitor brands, and we do not work together in the same way. And I think my counterpart on the other side, Jenny Taylor, she kind of felt that way too. Like, Atomic and Solomon were in the same building, but I would not even say we got along, really. And like, it was very much like Atomic and Solomon, and there's a wall between, and Atomic, for lack of a better word, like bred that culture, like really kind of leaned into that culture. I was like, we are our own brand. Like, we've made it this far. We kicked out of race culture and we need to be our own standalone brand, and we don't need Solomon. And so the day that they were like, okay, now we're going to merge these two brands together and you're going to be sort of the consumer facing marketing manager for the two of them, it was really challenging. I mean, it's really hard. Like, when you think about it, you worked in an office that had competitor brands together. And then to say, you know what, like, you're going to market both of these brands and they have the exact same quote unquote products to some degree, and you have to figure out how to market them. Like, that's really challenging. And I'm a true brand believer. And so when someone said, you have to take on this other brand that you're not sure you believe in yet, just do it. What does it matter? Just do it. It was really hard for me. It really was. It threw me for a loop for a while.
And then fast forward again 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
The deck is shuffled again.
Yep.
And I don't think you're dealt the best hand. How does your time end? Do you quit, get fired, laid off? How does that work?
Yeah, so I knew you'd ask me this, so I'm like kind of prepped for it. This is probably one of the reasons why I have like scar tissue, and I don't talk about it because it still like kind of stings to me a little, is that like after Jordan went to Armada, we had 3 or 4 marketing directors come in from like Keene and random ass places, this dude from Atlanta that didn't know anything. And they made the culture like really somewhat hard to manage, and I wasn't flexible. And now I like kind of see that. I was like, I'm Atomic, I'll do this Solomon work, but I'm Atomic, like I'm a brand person, and I wasn't flexible enough to be a part of that organization. And so yeah, they made a decision and shuffled the deck a little bit, and I was a part of that, and I got laid off, and luckily had been interviewing with Skullcandy, and kind of reluctantly interviewing with Skullcandy, honestly, because I was just like, no, like, I'm ski industry, you know? I mean, you probably have felt that way. Like, I'm ski industry. Like, I can't leave this family and this world. No way. And then they made that decision for me. And now I look at it as like the best opportunity ever. But at the time it was heartbreaking. Like, it sucked.
What actually happens? Because I've seen it before. It's
Yeah.
like on a Friday, you're sitting at your desk, staring at your screen, and you hope someone doesn't come and tap you on the shoulder. And if they do, that means you have a meeting and you're probably out of the building within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that how it worked with you?
That sort of is. It was this marketing director. His name was Michael something. And he was there, and he had only been there for a few months. And yeah, I was in a meeting. I can't remember who we were meeting with. And he kind of just was like, hey, come over here. And I sat in a room with HR, and they ran through some stuff that, God, I don't want to point fingers in any way whatsoever, because now I look back and I'm like, I wasn't wholeheartedly in it, but they ran through some stuff that was probably just like reasons, because I didn't believe in the Atomic Solomon system. And I was pretty vocal about it. And like, I didn't believe in merging those brands. And they ran through some stuff on it wasn't a Friday. It was probably like a Tuesday or something. But yeah, it's like a manila folder at 5:30 in the afternoon, and you kind of know what's going on. But like, I have so much sympathy and empathy for people that either get let go or fired or anything, furloughed, because it's so hard on you. You don't expect that ever. And I didn't. I truly believed in what was happening with those brands, and I was too involved with them, honestly. And I get that now.
Well, if you're furloughed, though, you're not going to be bitter. When you get laid off or fired,
Sure.
You get pissed off at the company. I mean, what skis do you ski on these days?
I still ski on Atomic.
Okay.
I have some good friends that are still there. I'm not pissed off at Atomic. Like, actually, when it happened, of course I blamed Solomon, which it isn't their fault. But I got a phone call the next day from Wolfgang Meyerhofer, who is the CEO at Atomic Global, called my cell phone and talked to me about it and as did a few of the people in Austria. And I had a great relationship with those guys. And I guess I say I don't blame Atomic. I mean, I've had people that have been like, what the hell, you ski at Atomic? But like, honestly, I think they make the best skis. And secondly, like, they grew my love for skiing. Like, Atomic grew my love for skiing. I'll always be a skier because of working for Atomic.
And then you get the job with Skullcandy, which is an interesting one to me because I love the brand. They're born on a chairlift and they have action sports roots. The culture seems really, really great. I think they just won some like award that you posted on the internet of like 2020 best managed companies. But
yeah.
You make a cool product. You have cool programs going on, but then the place that you work looks pretty rad as well.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important pieces of Skullcandy is we work in a arguably like a boring industry. We work in consumer electronics, right? You know, so it's not that cool. But our founder, Rick Alden, and the people that came sort of underneath him and rose us through to where we are now, they built a really fun culture and they've stayed in Park City. And the office, like when I started interviewing with them, like the office that we were formerly in, we just built a new one 2 years ago, but the whole thing was like a skate pool. Like all the rails in the building were former skate rails. There was a skate ramp upstairs. There's community ping pong tables and all kinds of that like fun, cool cultural stuff that a lot of offices have now. But like Rick built that office with the intention of feeling like an action sports and skate brand. And we've carried that forward to the office that we're in now. So we're kind of across the street in Park City, Utah. And we'll never leave Park City, Utah, from what I can tell, because it really is like what makes us different and our employees different. But yeah, we have a half pipe in the office and people skate it all the time. Our athletes are in there skating a bunch. And it really connects us to outdoors and what's going on. That office looks at the Olympic Park jumps and we're right at the base of Park City and canyons and all that stuff. So it's a fun little office. Like we moved in 2 years ago, really with the intention of being more collaborative, which is kind of wild right now to talk about because it's crazy to think about going back to work and, you know, having stand-up desk and talking to each other and all that stuff. But yeah, the office was built to really incentivize collaboration and talking to one another and a really youthful, young culture. I mean, our oldest employee is probably 49 maybe, and that's our CEO. Like everyone else is pretty young and eager.
That's incredible. So you're hired on there as marketing manager about 5 years ago, and you've been killing it ever since. But when you start, what do you know about audio and that whole business?
Oh, nothing. Like literally nothing. I mean, I only knew the ski industry, and that's why I think I was so shell-shocked. Like even when Skullcandy called me, they called me before everything at Amer happened to interview. I was like, no way. And then as I went through the interviews, I'm like, this is a really interesting opportunity because I get to be involved in action sports and things that have the same culture of the other brands I've had. But this business is completely different. Like you're selling to Best Buy and Target and Walmart and Amazon, and they're the ones that pay your paycheck, not retailers that sell skis and small companies. So I didn't know anything. But for my position, I was the international marketing manager. My position was to really be the go-between between the HQ and the distributors, like you mentioned. So it was my role to just roll out marketing to those guys. And Skullcandy in general, like we make tech products, but we make fun, accessible products at the right price point. So I don't need to be like a Sennheiser or some of those like heavy tech products. Like what we needed to do is make audio products cool.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. And that's not that hard to do.
So you say that you're the conduit between the distributors and you're kind of handing out the playbook, making sure all the POP things are being ordered correctly, I would think, and all that stuff globally. That's a big job. How many people are you managing to do something like that?
I really wasn't managing anyone. Like Skullcandy owned at that time 5 offices around the world, a European office, a Canadian office, a China, Japan, and Mexico City office. So I was really just the person that would go visit those places and travel all around the world and just be their sort of support person. And so I wasn't managing anyone at that time besides just managing the local marketing managers to help support them. But I was kind of a one-man show with the leadership of my boss at the time.
That sounds like an amazing gig. Just
it was.
Travel with a company credit card and make sure everybody's stoked on the brand and driving sell-through. Sounds great.
Yeah, it was so great. Like I look back now, I mean, I went to one of those cities every 5 or 6 weeks and I was on the road a lot. And I think that I can appreciate being home and on the road. I get that. But I look back now and I'm like so bummed at myself for not like staying extra days and spending more time and being a part of it. Cause like those are the best cities in the world, like Tokyo and Shanghai and Zurich and Mexico City. And it was an incredible, incredible place kind of to be in. And it made me have like now in the position I'm in, like so much empathy for regions around the world and what informations they get and how can we support them as a brand being really insulated in Park City, you know?
Yeah.
So it was awesome.
In the beginning of your tenure at Skullcandy, the stock is absolutely tanking. I think it's down at like $1. The company gets bought by private equity. And what does that do to corporate culture and everything to do with the business? Is there a little hiccup for a year and then it starts rolling again, or how does that work?
I luckily came on when the stock was at like $6 or something like that. But there were people there, like some of my close friends at work were there when like they went public and they were like $19. And ever since they went public, it like tanked, like you said. And it did hit like I forget what the all-time low is, but I think we sold at like 5 something a share when we went private equity. But in all honesty, going private was the best thing that could ever happen to us. Like when you're reporting quarterly on how your company's doing, that for company morale is really hard because you're answering to shareholders. Your CEO and your CFO are just constantly chasing dollars. And they were. And like we would make risky decisions to try to hit quarterly earnings, and it wasn't right for the business. So going public was one of the best things that at least I've witnessed for Skullcandy, because we don't chase quarters anymore. Like we can spend how we want and it's not reckless, but like every dollar isn't being looked at by shareholders. So it wasn't rowdy for the people in-house. I think people were really excited to go back to private, and Skullcandy has a lot of people that went from private to public back to private, like the employees, and they were ready to go back private. So it was great, honestly. I'm glad I went through it as an employee.
And then the next step for you within the brand is you go to Senior Global Brand Manager. So you're still at the manager level. What changes with this role?
So I went from like the international side where I was like taking the plans that the brand team was making.
Yep.
I went from rolling those plans out to international regions to actually helping build those plans. So truly like on the HQ side, being a part of making the sausage or whatever you want to call it, to like making those plans where then someone else would roll them out to international regions and domestically to the US region. So being more of an integral part of the brand and building those plans, which is what I was doing also at Atomic, because we got to build a little more of our own plans than normal. But yeah, I just got to be a deeper part of the brand, and it's obviously leading into like where I am now, but being a part of what we were doing internally rather than being a resource to help the regions.
So you're putting together the pieces and creating the creative and the messaging that everybody's going to deploy. You're creating those in the kitchen, and then you're handing them out once they're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. Planning product launches, planning campaign launches, understanding who we are, both domestically and internationally. I mean, that international experience, it really helped me understand who we are around the world because we were super disconnected. Regions would run their own campaigns and do different things. And so probably up until recently, like we weren't always on the same page. And now we're in such a good place where the same campaign is rolling out everywhere. But being on the HQ side of things like you were, like you get to really help build things from the ground up. And that's what that position did.
Yeah, your fingerprints are all over the globe.
Totally.
So it sounds like you're more in the details and everything back then, where in your second job, where you're actually able to do some stuff, make a difference, see your fingerprints everywhere. It's exciting. But then I find when you get bumped up, because you've been bumped up to global brand director, now I think the buck probably stops with you on what the global messaging is going to be, but you probably don't have as much hand in the details of it. Do you find that?
Yeah. I mean, you're like dead on. It's an interesting position to be in where you start to manage people and the people that actually, I say, get shit done. Like I was a part of the team that got shit done, and I loved being a part of that. Like I'm a really strong, what they call individual contributor. Like I can sit down, build decks, do all that stuff. But when you move up a little bit and start managing teams, you are a little more hands off. And I think actually during this pandemic, you realize how strong your employees are because they're the ones like really getting work done while you manage their workload. And yeah, it was an interesting transition. I would say I'm so involved in the details that it irks me when I don't understand what's going on and I get kind of like a little fiery and pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
So my team has learned that like they keep me pretty involved in the details, but it went from managing a person of one to at one point managing a team of, I think 12 or 13 at once, and a lot of different things. So like my current role involves sports marketing, event marketing, social marketing, brand marketing, and then some production and things like that. So yeah, I think when you move to a position where you start to manage people rather than just your own workload, things change a lot.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's motivated by different things, and everybody's looking for you to be the motivation, and you have to have 12 different hats for the 12 different people, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And because our teams are young and like really actually like pretty committed to the brand, everyone has different personalities. And I think one of the things that I was not prepped for and have really done a lot of like research and reading on is just understanding how to manage people, because that's one of the hardest things is like just managing expectations and people, because people are different. And yeah, like you can't manage anyone the same way.
Feelings and respect go a whole lot in the workplace. And if you hurt people's feelings and they don't respect you, they're not going to work hard for you.
Oh my God. Like exactly. Especially like nowadays where like company culture is at an all-time high and you need to make sure that like, I think corporate CEOs and stuff, they need to build this culture where employees feel supported and like making sure that they're involved in that. And luckily, like our exec team does. I bet every single exec knows every single employee's names and what they do, and they make that a point. But like, you can't sort of push those emotions aside. And I think through this pandemic specifically, making sure to have meetings with every single person and talk through things and make sure they're feeling supported has been one of the only ways to like keep things alive. Because when you piss an employee off, like they're done with you these days. They can go anywhere if they want.
Yeah, well, they've got a dream job in Skullcandy, most likely. So who knows if they're going to be able to go get a better job.
Well, everyone thinks it's a better job when they go somewhere else. But we call them boomerangs at Skullcandy, where they like leave, go to another place where they think it's like so much better, and then fly right back to us.
Nice. Well, we're going to be done talking about the brand. You've made it through that part. Congratulations. At this point, we have inappropriate questions. It's where I get someone to ask you questions, but no one wanted to ask you questions because the people I know that would are too close to you. So I'm going to ask you inappropriate questions, which could be even worse.
Okay.
My first question is, you got married right, I think, at the beginning of all this COVID shit. Is that correct?
We did. We got married in January, shit, I'm going to fuck up our wedding date, but January 17th, I think, in Mexico. So we did a destination wedding, and we did it right before the pandemic. We had 80 of our closest friends and family and everyone. And yeah, we did it. I'm so happy.
So I'm sure the quarantine has created a lot of moments for you and your husband as you haven't been able to travel in this honeymoon phase of your wedding. So you had to reschedule this podcast earlier because of a doctor's appointment. And I guess my first inappropriate question will be, are you pregnant?
No, I'm not pregnant.
I
had an eye doctor appointment, which is sort of annoying. Utah hasn't really kicked in to actually adhering to things, so doctors are still open. But yeah, no quarantine pregnancy. But I've gotten a lot of text about that, so.
Yeah, I figured I would check.
Yeah.
Your husband can work on that tonight. For question number 2, you're killing it with your career, and it looks like being a woman hasn't hurt you in terms of where you've wanted to go in life. Have you ever felt overlooked for a position or left out of things in work-wise because of your gender?
Actually, I haven't. I think I've worked for really like progressive companies where I've never felt that way. I'm super lucky, knock on wood. Like being in the ski industry, you know, it's like boys club in a lot of ways. But I think being a female in the ski industry helped my career, and it made me sort of a little bit different. And then at Skullcandy, we have female leadership on the C-suite. Like our CMO is a female, our CFO is a female. So no way. If anything, like I've felt more empowered by being female at both of these companies, for sure.
And what is the most sexist thing you've seen or heard in a professional setting?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. That's a tough one. Ugh. I don't know. Okay, so we used to sponsor some athletes at Skullcandy that weren't quite right for the brand. And we sponsored this wingsuit. His name was Andy Stumpf. He was like a former Navy SEAL, like, I don't know, not my kind of thing, but he was like a wingsuit jumper and would do like the longest wingsuit fly thing, whatever. He came and spoke at our company for like one of our big company events, and our CEO was like pretty into him. And And I think there were spectacular things about him, but one of the most unspectacular things about him was that he got up on stage and talked about how he got in a bar fight with a woman and ended up swinging on her.
Jesus.
And yeah, which was ridiculous. And actually Steve Barra, the skater, of the Barracks, was at that company event, and he stood up and held the mic and was like, "Did you just say you actually swung on a woman?" And like really defended it. It was my first or second, we call it Skull Week. Every year we have a Skull Week for company bonding. It was stunning to watch because it's like, actually, this is our company culture with Steve Barra and people like that, not this other dude, like it was awesome to watch and witness. So it wasn't for me specifically, but it was cool to watch people defend that.
Awesome. Well, I am going to look at your career as a pretty amazing one. Starting in North Carolina, you had no business making your way out to Utah to work for Atomic, but you killed it at Atomic, and now you've gotten to like the top of the game at Skullcandy. I mean, is there anywhere higher for you to go other than like the executive level?
Jeez, I hope so. I don't know. I don't know what's next for me, but I currently love this brand and what's going on. And yeah, I'm super stoked on where it's going to be. But yeah, I think career is super important to me, and like progression and making sure that I'm fulfilling that. And so we'll see.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and that's our podcast.
Yay. Thank you, Mike.
So that was time with Kathryn Smith, and it's been such a long time since I've done a business episode, and there are plenty more to come. Kathryn really stands out as she had no idea that she was going to end up in this world. But like what happens for a lot of people, when she did her 2 years as a ski bum in Colorado, the industry pretty much grabbed her and pulled her in and would not let her go. Kathryn's crushed it at every level in the industry, and even her setbacks have helped her in the long run. So good story and not my last identical twin. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to rate me on whatever platform you listen to me on, and support my amazing sponsors. They are Stanley and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone. And we can